I came in at the end of season one. That show had had a very high turnover rate, and they were at the point where they just wanted, let's get that guy. So, so I came in and directed episode seven. Omni-Man kills the Immortal at the end of it. Directing on Avengers, doing that, and Transformers, it transitioned to Photoshop. I was there at Hasbro for almost 8 years for both shows. AI is as inevitable as the nuclear bomb, for better or for worse.
Indeed.
Batman has been a character I've been lucky enough to work on a number of times during my career, and he's one of my favorites.
Hello and welcome to Prolific Perspectives. This is Kamal Hassan, your host and founder of Prolific Animation Studio. We are all about exploring innovation, entrepreneurship, and how to be successful. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Vinton Heuck, an episodic director at Lectodian Animation. Hey Vinton, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, Vinton, so please give your brief introduction to our audience so they'll know more about you.
My name is Vinton Heuck. It's a very unusual German last name that almost nobody can pronounce. And I'm an animation director who's been working in the industry for
Mm-hmm.
over 20 years, mostly directing at
Mm-hmm.
this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked on a lot of different TV shows, a
Mm-hmm.
movie here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my career was spent at Warner Brothers. So
Mm-hmm.
the first show I directed on was The Batman,
Mm-hmm.
and then over at Warner Brothers, I directed on Young Justice
Mm-hmm.
and directed on Harley.
Okay.
And I'm currently directing on something that's been publicly announced, so I can just talk about it a little bit because it's based on Anthony
Mm-hmm.
Bourdain's graphic novel,
Okay.
the famous foodie, and
Mm-hmm.
it's called Get Jiro.
Okay.
So, and then in between Warner Brothers, I've had stints at other studios. I've done
Mm-hmm.
three different Transformers shows. The latest one was at Nickelodeon,
Mm-hmm.
Transformers Earthspark, and
Mm-hmm.
Transformers Prime,
Prime.
probably the most popular one, I think. And then
Mm-hmm.
Robots in Disguise.
Yes. I read about
Only
that. Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Marvel
Mm-hmm.
fan. So the only thing I've
Mm-hmm.
directed that was Marvel so far has been
Mm-hmm.
Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Great. Great.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a few other, and then Watchmen Part Two. I guess that's a pretty big one. I
Uh-huh.
co-directed that with the
Okay.
main architect. The main
Okay.
architect of that,
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Vietti, was the producer, director. He
Mm-hmm.
needed help on that second one, so I was happy to
Mm-hmm.
come in and help
Mm-hmm.
him.
Great. So let's start off with some nostalgia here. What was your first, very first, I want to do this for a living moment with animation or comics?
It was that the moment I got hired as one of the higher
Mm-hmm.
profile storyboard artists back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he was still very busy in the 90s, and he was working on some of the coolest cartoons on TV, namely the X-Men and
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man,
Mm-hmm.
and even a little bit of Gargoyles for Disney.
Uh-huh.
And so I got a chance to work on all of those because of him. Just
Mm-hmm.
and I was his he was a board artist, and he had me and a few other guys helping do cleanups on his boards. And
Uh-huh.
that's how I got in, and that was up in
Mm-hmm.
I just lucked into that. It was up
Mm-hmm.
in Washington, wasn't even in
Oh.
California.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been shopping my portfolio around. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
at, it was a comic book portfolio because
Mm-hmm.
that was my main thing is I wanted to be a comic book artist,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. I did for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a notable comic book illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I sort of fell in. Just kind of, he could see my artistic skills, and he would give me a big. Back in the day, it was a big phone book pile of paper with drawn boards, drawn with blue line pencil, and then I would clean those up with pen or sometimes pencil, and I did that for a few years. And then I just transitioned into boards, and that's long story short, that's what kind of brought me to LA.
Okay.
Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you needed to be,
Mm-hmm.
you still, it helps to be in LA, but it's not nearly as necessary as it was,
Uh-huh.
the
Mm-hmm.
advent of modern technology. You can do everything
Uh-huh.
remote, really. It's
Yeah.
possible. But back
Mm-hmm.
back then, you kind of had to be there. So I came to LA, and then I just started getting jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Started at Saban,
Mm-hmm.
working on a couple of projects that never saw the light of day, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't a great start. And then I managed to jump over to Sony, and I doing a
Great.
revision
Mm-hmm.
cleanup over there. And it
Mm-hmm.
shows like Jackie Chan Adventures and Godzilla, Big Guy and Rusty.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there that I transitioned from cleanup artist to full board
Mm-hmm.
artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a while. I got hired
Mm-hmm.
Mike Young Productions. I was doing the He-Man cartoon in the early 2000s as a
Mm-hmm.
board artist. And then from there, I went over to my first job at Warner Brothers doing storyboards for The Batman.
Okay.
And I did
Mm-hmm.
that for a few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually working with um, Brandon Vietti as my director, who was
Oh.
the we would come together
So
later.
are you as you just mentioned about the the publicly announced project, which is will be coming into the production soon or already in the production. So are you doing that with Warner Bros?
Yeah, I'm back at Warner Brothers for that. Um, I work in their nice, big, beautiful building, um, and it's a hybrid situation. So it's like I have to work there 3 days a week, and
Okay.
2 days I can work at home. So like today I'm at home,
Okay.
and it's pretty ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely digging the project. I think it's going to be very cool.
Right. So as you just mentioned about the cleanups, and you will be assisting in a lot of projects, Warner Bros. And many other big names. So for storyboarding, what changed the most in your workflow from when you started to now, especially with the rise of tools like Storyboard Pro and Blender?
Right. So in the beginning, I was drawing on paper, So it was just you would just most of us used this a light blue
Yeah.
pencil that
Mm-hmm.
that and that wouldn't because the boards that got sent out overseas were usually photocopied at a
Uh,
Xerox machine,
yeah.
and so that rough wouldn't really show up, and then you'd go over it with a
Mm-hmm.
pencil or sometimes ink.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And yeah, those were the tools. Like the Xerox machine was always going in the office.
Mm-hmm.
You usually had a light table because you put
Mm-hmm.
your rough down and you could put another sheet over it to do the
Yeah.
clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then right around the time after directing on Avengers, between
Mm-hmm.
that and Transformers, it transitioned to Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there at Hasbro for like I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
almost 8 years for both shows, I think.
Oh,
And during that
wow.
time, it transitioned from Photoshop to Storyboard Pro, and then that's what
Mm-hmm.
we've been using
Mm-hmm.
since. And there's
Mm-hmm.
it's a great program. It allows you to work much faster, and
Mm-hmm.
you can break up scenes a lot easier. So the boards now tend to be
Mm-hmm.
more posed out
Mm-hmm.
because the workflow is quicker. And then, of
Uh-huh.
course, who knows what AI is going to do to all this going forward.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I'm not, it's like studios haven't, like, I think they're all trying to figure out how that's going to fit in. But then that model's always changing too
Mm-hmm.
from almost week to week. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Since you brought up the the topic of AI, and would it be help or just a hype?
well, we'll see. It's an evolving technology. It's evolving
Uh-huh.
technology that
Mm-hmm.
nobody fully, even experts disagree on as to like
Yeah.
where it's
Mm-hmm.
I think it's leading us into the great unknown.
Yeah.
So yes,
Mm-hmm.
they're not technology. There's something called technological inevitability, and that means there's no stopping technology. If you don't
Absolutely.
do it, someone else is going to do it. So AI
100%.
AI is as inevitable as the nuclear bomb, for better or for worse.
Indeed.
So yeah, it's like
Hmm.
but it's not a human brain. So I don't know. At the point where it becomes the equivalent of a human brain and all the creative
Hmm.
choices. For one, it still won't be human because it won't have lived a human
Yeah.
experience. It won't have a human body. It won't have
Hmm.
human emotions, which are driven by the body itself and chemicals
Absolutely.
reactions to the body.
Chemical reactions.
But we might all be in trouble because it'll be a vastly superior intellect. But until that moment, whatever that looks like,
Hmm.
I believe there's going to be a human hands involved
Hmm.
with creation of artistic content. And there's also
100%.
copyright issues involved. It gets, when
Yeah, because
AI.
I discussed with other people as well, IP issues will still be there with
Yeah.
AI. So
Mhm.
I completely agree with you on that. So would it be like something, because AI will be operated by the human, because the new job has been created, a prompt engineer. They will be giving a right prompt to the AI, and AI will be getting us the collective data that has already been input into the AI system. So yes, there will be copyright issues, IP issues, but still, I think that's gonna optimize the pipelines in the animation industry. What do you think on that? Because we
Yeah,
have
just
lengthy pipelines, lengthy processes, it will help us as a assistant to optimize everything. What do you think?
yeah, it will help optimize. Hopefully, not used as a shortcut. If it is used as a shortcut, you know, the, the signs of that you'll be able to see. But just like Storyboard Pro as a program has made the workflow quicker and easier for the
Yeah,
storyboard artist.
yeah,
And so, as an artist, and this being as someone who's worked in the industry as long as I have,
yeah,
you have to keep up and stay relevant with whatever those technological advances are. And if you don't,
100%,
you become a dinosaur. So
100%. Mm-hmm.
when I first started, I remember there was a guy I worked with in the studio who
Mm-hmm.
hated computers. He didn't even, back in the late 90s, you could afford to hate computers and maybe not have one. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just you just have to be able to keep up with whatever's happening. But I do think
Mm-hmm.
there's still many limitations. Like I know
Uh-huh.
for a fact that studios are trying to figure out how to implement AI into the workflow
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's legit, you know. And
And the reason the
there's
studio wants the
requirements.
AI to be implemented in the pipeline is because they want to optimize the budgets at the same time. That's why they
Yeah,
want the
that's
assistance
that's
from the AI.
understandable. That's always
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
always they're always
Mm-hmm.
very. I mean, most of the
Mm-hmm.
shows I've been on have all the shows I've been on have
Mm-hmm.
limited budgets. I don't
Yeah.
work in feature. I work
Okay.
on TV where it gets done fast and
Yeah.
much cheaper and
Mm-hmm.
has a budget. And I've seen many
Mm-hmm.
times those budgets get blown for
Mm-hmm.
any number of reasons. So
Yeah.
um, if they're going to have another tool to help with that, of
Mm-hmm.
course they're going to use it. And we're all gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what that is, So
Mm-hmm.
I do have some
Mm-hmm.
concerns and worries on how much it will end up
Mm-hmm.
as a replacement tool, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't. I think there
Mm-hmm.
has to be an artist hand. There might be
100%.
less than there
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
just then, but they're still going to have to have some kind of crew creating a
Mm-hmm.
show
Yeah.
for the studios.
100%. So since you've been working, from 90s till date into the industry, so are you still? What's your process like when you're starting a new episode? Are you a thumbnail on paper person first, or straight to the digital?
I've gone all 100% digital. Like I don't like the only thing I wish I mean I don't I've had such a busy career that almost all the artwork related stuff I do is professional
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all digital. And I there's a few people that like to kind of draw little thumbnails in the
Mm-hmm.
margins of scripts or on paper, and I don't even
Mm-hmm.
bother with that. I just do everything right up my
Mm-hmm.
Cintiq.
All right.
Yeah.
So, how did you approach storyboarding that final scenes of Invincible where Omni-Man takes out of the Guardians and making it brutal yet clear and impactful.
Well, and that one was kind of interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
came in at the end of season one. They
Okay.
had been they had that show had had a very high turnover rate
Mm-hmm.
of talent,
Mm-hmm.
and they were at the
Mm-hmm.
point where they just wanted some guys on it that were veterans and
Mm-hmm.
experienced, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, let's get that guy. So so I came in and I only directed one episode. I directed episode 7,
Okay.
the one that was like, we need to talk, Mark. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
one where Omni-Man kills the immortal at the end of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Mm-hmm.
where Mark sees who his dad is for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was that was a lot of fun. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely put my heart into that one, and I think
Mm-hmm.
considering all the problems it was going through as a production
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
trying to find the right animation studio,
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it turned out not bad, the final product, and it was definitely a very cool story.
It
So
was. Yeah.
yeah,
So, coming to my next question, any moment where storyboards you did end up changing how the story was told?
there's a lot of times. Um, it's a very collaborative process. So part of my job is to look at the script and story as a whole, whether it's an episode or something larger. And I'm a story guy as much as I am just a storyboard artist, or so I have to think about things like pacing and whether
Uh-huh.
all the elements of the story are working together, or are there
Mm-hmm.
parts of the story that technically can't even be achieved with
Uh-huh.
the type of show I'm working on, whether it's 2D or 3D, or
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of problem solving that often goes into the script work. And then there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of parts in the script I just want to amplify more, particularly like in action scenes where it may be just
Mm-hmm.
simple
Mm-hmm.
lines,
Uh-huh.
like, King's army invades New York
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and fighting ensues. Sometimes it's just very like there's not much there, and they're leaving it to us
Uh-huh.
as the
Mm-hmm.
director and the board artist to
Mm-hmm.
come up with the rest. So yeah, very
Mm-hmm.
very often. Like that was an episode actually on Earth Humanity's Adventures
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
where where we just came up with all the stuff of, well, what did it look like and how is
Mm-hmm.
it achievable in a 2D animated show for television to have a an Kang's army from the future attack and invade New York.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that so I think on that one
Uh-huh.
we kind of came up with some things that were a little too big and too
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
ambitious, and animation
Mm-hmm.
studio was like, hey, we can't do all this. You gotta rethink some of those. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the things
Mm-hmm.
often change from where
Uh-huh.
it starts on the page to where it ends up by the time
Mm-hmm.
me and the board artists are done.
Great. So, I'm coming back to coming to the other question of mine here. The Long Halloween has a noir, slow burn tone. How did you use the storyboarding to build that tension visually, especially in the quieter, more suspenseful scene?
Yeah, that was pretty great. I enjoyed those. I was working in-house at Warner Brothers on various projects, and that's one of the things Warner Brothers has been good about doing or trying to do is uh is to keep you busy between projects. And that was one of those things where I was done with Young Justice, and it was a
Uh huh.
transitionary time between that and Harley, and
Uh
they
huh.
just grabbed me to help out for
Okay.
just only a couple script pages.
Uh
So
huh.
I don't though my involvement with that was just a sequence at the end. I think
Mm-hmm.
of the first one where Batman meets with Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon in
Oh. Uh huh.
an alley,
Yeah.
smoke-filled alley,
Mm-hmm.
after the yacht episode. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like a larger narrative. I was just responsible for storyboarding just those couple
Okay.
pages, but I
Mm-hmm.
loved it. I got to draw a creepy looking Batman in the shadows in
Mm-hmm.
an alley. And I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
love, Batman has been a character I've been lucky enough to work on a number of times
Mm-hmm.
during my career, and he's one of my favorites.
Uh-huh. Great. So, what's your take on where the animation industry is heading, especially with all the streaming shifts and layoffs we have seen lately?
Yeah, so my take on that is yes, there has been there it's it just like the housing market. If you think of the housing
Yeah.
market, and it went through a huge bubble and it went to
Yeah.
these artificially heightened prices
Mm-hmm.
and values. The same thing
Yeah.
happened with animation.
Yeah.
So it it I did an interesting thing where I looked at the number recently. I looked at
Mm-hmm.
the number of shows that were in production when I first got into the industry in the late 90s
Yeah.
compared to now.
Now
And
it's huge. Yeah.
I didn't see a huge difference actually, because
Mm-hmm.
back then it was a limit. There was like limited venues to get shows
Yeah.
out there in the late
Yeah.
90s through cable.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few places were creating content.
Yeah.
And so there's this perception that like Hollywood is dying or dead, or the animation industry is dead,
Mm-hmm.
or dying. That's definitely not the case at all.
Yeah.
And I think yes, it is. The jobs are much scarcer and fewer than they were, but what they
Mm-hmm.
were was at a much artificially
Yeah.
uh, boosted kind of high, and
Mm-hmm.
that was being driven by
Mm-hmm.
the app wars, the studios trying to like create and content to attract viewership, and they had all this money to spend, and they weren't
Mm-hmm.
concerned about how much it cost. They were just like, let's like make as many shows possible to
Mm-hmm.
try and capture audience, and that was an
Mm-hmm.
unsustainable model. So at
Yeah.
some point they were like, okay, we can't just keep spending and spending and spending.
Yeah.
Uh, we have to rein it in, and that's what they did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we all saw it coming. At least I saw it coming. I'm like, I even at the time I was like, because you've seen these things happen over time. If you look at if you were to look at a chart, you'd see like
Mm-hmm.
in the late 90s, it was actually more of a high than it was,
Yeah.
it started. It kind of would dip up and down throughout the 2000s, and
Mm-hmm.
then in the 2010s up to the point where it was like at this crazy level, you would
Yeah.
have seen a huge spike that just like almost went off the chart. And then it was like everyone's got a job, everyone, and so it also brought in a huge amount of people, like new people and talent.
100%. Yeah.
So now it's like so what we have now,
Mm-hmm.
unlike before, is like there weren't necessarily, when I
Mm-hmm.
started, there weren't like a huge number of animation jobs, but there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a huge talent pool
Mm-hmm.
necessarily there
Mm-hmm.
from this gigantic swell that had just happened. And what we have now is we have all this talent and
Mm-hmm.
much fewer jobs. We have more
Mm-hmm.
talent than ever, trained talent, and so that makes the job scarcity even worse. So
Yeah.
it is a challenge for sure.
It is.
Um, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, an old um, a guest artist that came into my art class in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I won't get into like his who he is or his work, but he
Mm-hmm.
always said there's always room at the top. So like
Yeah.
if you can try to be at the top or amongst the best,
Mm-hmm.
then that's where you're gonna find. I wouldn't say I'm at the top or the best, but
Uh-huh.
I'm at least I'm close enough, and I have other qualities because it's not just about talent.
Yeah.
It's about you know, the trifecta, which is, being able to get your work done in time and
Yeah.
working well with others, being
Mm-hmm.
someone that people want to work with, and then
Yeah.
also the quality of your work kind of all coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
Great.
so it's
So is there a character from comics or animation that you haven't worked on yet but really want to? Like you just said about the Batman.
yeah, there definitely are.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm a really huge fan of Robert E. Howard's Conan.
Oh.
So that so
Uh-huh.
I actually did work on a project that was started
Mm-hmm.
up by a small company. They
Mm-hmm.
were doing an adaptation of Red Nails, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately they lost the funding. So I actually technically did get paid to work on a project with of Conan, but it fell
Mm-hmm.
through. So I would,
Uh-huh.
and I know they've been, you hear rumors. They've been trying to get that
Mm-hmm.
that character off the
Mm-hmm.
ground and again in some new animated series for a while. So that would be something I'd love to work on. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's plenty of others if I took time to think about it. But I mean, I have been lucky enough to work on a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the properties I do love. Batman, Superman, the
Mm-hmm.
X-Men.
Great. So, what's one project people might not know you worked on, but you really proud of?
But I'm really proud of. Well, I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know how much people really pay attention to names. I know there's one I uh I worked on that probably no one knows about that. Um I, I I'm not happy that I worked on. So, I could tell you that one. You want to hear that? You want to hear what that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
is?
yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
between coming from Washington to LA to work for Saban
Mm-hmm.
Entertainment, I stopped off in San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
and I worked on this show for 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and it was called Vampires, as opposed to Vampires. It was like Van was VAN, and it was about cars uh, that were reanimated by an alien green meteor
Mm-hmm.
and went around instead of sucking blood, they sucked gas out of other
Uh-huh.
cars. Yeah.
So, Linton, you've been into the industry for almost three decades, from the '90s till today. So, have you ever thought starting your own studio like Warner Bros. And other big names out there, or you really enjoy
Yeah,
just the direction part of the industry?
starting my own studio, I think is like an animation studio at least is definitely too ambitious for me. I
Uh huh.
wouldn't know where to begin to secure the
Uh huh.
funding.
Uh
I
huh.
could come into one that's already established and run it. I could produce on it, but
Uh
as
huh.
far as that starting the actual studio myself, that's I'm a creative guy, so uh,
Uh huh.
you can put me
Business is
in as
not your thing,
yeah, not
maybe.
as much. I mean, if it was, I've thought
Uh huh.
about trying to start my own comic book studio. That's a much
Okay.
smaller endeavor that wouldn't just
Uh huh.
involve myself and maybe a few other people. But
So, have you
trying
given a
to,
shot to that, or not? Not yet.
um,
Comic book
I've
studio.
I've had
Mm-hmm.
some kind of
Mm-hmm.
failed attempts to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's something I might
Uh-huh.
go back to. One of the things I'm trying to do
Mm-hmm.
is diversify myself as an artist, especially in the
Okay.
industry as it is.
Mm-hmm.
I am currently working, but
Mm-hmm.
there's an increased chance, I think, of having more downtime in between jobs. So
Okay.
one of the things
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's one of the things I'm looking at is how do I use my talents to help supplement or fill those gaps? And comic books is one of the things I'm
Mm-hmm.
exploring. And the other
Mm-hmm.
thing is I'm actively pursuing online teaching.
Oh,
So that's something I'll probably be doing more of relatively soon.
great. So since you just mentioned about teaching, teaching has been super rewarding. What's something you always tell up and coming artist?
If you want to make it professionally as an artist, at least this was my journey. I had to prioritize it at the very top. I had to make it, especially when I was younger. When I was younger, I could really afford to do that. I didn't have family.
Mm-hmm.
My operating costs were relatively low. Didn't have a lot of debt or anything. Just a young
Mm-hmm.
guy. Um, when I had no skills outside of that. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
minimum wage job I have, uh, when when that ended and I ended up on
Mm-hmm.
unemployment,
Uh-huh.
I I would get my unemployment checks and I would work my ass off working on my art portfolio. And when it came time to show which employers I was submitting to, I was putting like Marvel
Mm-hmm.
comics,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, submitting my work to these companies. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to conventions. My whole life revolved around uh,
Mm-hmm.
increasing my skill and just
Mm-hmm.
taking notes. I would go to conventions, I'd show my work to other
Mm-hmm.
professional artists. I would
Mm-hmm.
take what they told me and I would try and use whatever advice or
Mm-hmm.
criticisms they had to
Mm-hmm.
improve myself as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
and just really worked my ass off until I finally started getting paid work. And I think it's not something you can do lightly. You can't just like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I'll try it out, see if it has
Yeah.
something you have to
Mm-hmm.
really just fully commit to.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need like an honest assessment of yourself and your skills,
Mm-hmm.
and and the willingness to try and improve those skills.
Mm-hmm.
And at least
Great.
that's how I did it. Yeah.
Great. So, thank you for giving us your valuable time. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. So, thanks
Mhm.
for tuning in to another episode of Prolific Perspectives. We hope you enjoyed this insightful conversation with Vinton. Don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Until next time.